There are a few Toyota Service Center recommendations that sound so reasonable, so harmless, and so routine that most owners never think twice before approving them. They don't feel like scams, they don't feel aggressive, and they don't feel unnecessary in the moment. That's exactly why they work. Toyota Service Centers don't need to pressure owners to sell these services. The language does the work for them. Words like routine, recommended, and due at this mileage carry authority. They sound official, responsible, almost unavoidable. Most Toyota owners who approve these services believe they're protecting their vehicle. They're not cutting corners. They're not ignoring maintenance. They're doing what they've always been told good owners do: stay ahead of problems. And that's where the trap quietly forms. Toyota engineers design vehicles around long-term stability. Systems are meant to operate for extended periods under consistent conditions. Fluids condition seals over time. Components settle into predictable wear patterns. When nothing is wrong, the system is already doing its job. Routine service center upsells interrupt that balance. Not dramatically. Not immediately. But repeatedly. Before we dig deeper, let me stop you for a moment. If you've ever sat in a Toyota service lounge and approved something simply because it sounded normal, tap the like button. Subscribe if you want Toyota ownership to feel simpler instead of more expensive. And if you've ever looked at a service invoice afterward and wondered what actually changed, leave a comment about it. I see every comment, and those experiences help other owners recognize the same patterns earlier. One of the most common routine services pushed at Toyota service centers is fuel system or injector cleaning. It's often bundled with oil changes, especially once a vehicle passes a certain mileage. The explanation sounds technical and convincing: carbon buildup, efficiency loss, preventing future problems. Here's the mechanical reality. Modern Toyota fuel systems are extremely resilient. Fuel quality standards are higher than they've ever been. Injectors are designed to stay clean under normal driving conditions. If your Toyota starts easily, idles smoothly, accelerates cleanly, and doesn't misfire, there is usually nothing for that service to fix. Owners who approve injector cleaning almost never notice a difference afterward. The engine runs exactly the same. Fuel economy doesn't change. Throttle response doesn't improve. But because nothing went wrong, the service feels justified. The second routine service that quietly drains wallets is throttle body cleaning sold on a schedule rather than symptoms. This one sounds especially important because it involves airflow and engine control. Advisors explain that buildup can cause rough idle or hesitation even if the owner hasn't experienced either. If your Toyota idles smoothly and responds predictably to throttle input, cleaning the throttle body does nothing measurable. Toyota engines are designed to tolerate normal buildup without issue. Cleaning something that isn't causing a problem doesn't restore performance, it simply disturbs a stable system. In some cases, unnecessary cleaning actually introduces problems. New drivability quirks that didn't exist before. Again, nothing catastrophic, just enough to make ownership slightly more annoying than it needed to be. The third routine service that service centers rely on heavily is fluid services sold by mileage alone. This is where fear enters the conversation. Brake fluid sounds like safety. Coolant sounds like overheating prevention. Power steering fluid sounds like avoiding loss of control. These services don't need to be urgent to be approved, they just need to feel responsible. But Toyota systems are not designed around rigid service menus. Brake fluid condition depends on moisture exposure, not mileage. Coolant longevity depends on contamination and heat history, not round numbers on the odometer. Power steering systems fail due to leaks and component wear, not because fluid reached a scheduled age. Service menus flatten all of that nuance into a simple checklist. From a long-term ownership perspective, that checklist approach creates unnecessary intervention. Systems that were functioning normally get disturbed. Seals that were conditioned comfortably get stressed. Small tolerances shift earlier than they should. Nothing breaks immediately. That's the key. Instead, issues appear years earlier than expected. Components that feel tired long before their time. Owners assume that's just aging. It isn't. It's cumulative disturbance. What makes these services especially effective is how they're presented. They're not sold individually. They're bundled, grouped, framed as efficiency. One visit, one approval. Everything handled. Toyota ownership doesn't work that way mechanically. Your Toyota does not age in bundles. It ages based on use, heat cycles, and stability. Packaging services together creates the illusion of thorough care, but often delivers unnecessary disruption instead. This is why you'll see two Toyotas of the same year, same mileage, and same engine age very differently. One remains dry, tight, and predictable. The other starts developing small issues that add up over time. The difference is rarely how often oil was changed. It's how often systems were disturbed without reason. Experienced Toyota mechanics understand this intuitively. That's why many of them quietly decline these routine services on their own vehicles. Not because they neglect maintenance, but because they know which systems actually need attention and which ones are better left alone. They wait for symptoms, changes in behavior, real indicators, not menu prompts. Once you understand that, the service center experience changes completely. You stop reacting to recommendations and start evaluating them. You ask what problem is being fixed right now. You ask what would happen if you waited. You separate maintenance from momentum. And something interesting happens when you do that. Invoices shrink. Visits get shorter. The car behaves better over time. Ownership becomes calmer instead of more expensive. Toyota didn't earn its reputation by requiring constant intervention. It earned it by building systems that last when they're allowed to operate as designed. The most reliable Toyotas aren't the ones that receive the most services, they're the ones that receive the right services at the right time, and nothing more. Once you see how these routine services quietly add cost without adding value, it becomes much easier to spot the next layer of the system, where estimates suddenly jump, urgency increases, and ownership starts to feel more expensive than it should. And that's where things get even more revealing. Once Toyota owners approve a few routine services, something subtle begins to happen. The recommendations don't slow down. They multiply. At first, everything feels reasonable. An oil change turns into a fluid suggestion. A fluid suggestion turns into an inspection note. An inspection note turns into a new line item on the estimate. None of it feels aggressive. None of it feels dishonest. It feels like the natural progression of taking care of the car. That's exactly why it works. Toyota service centers are built around momentum. Once an owner agrees to a baseline level of maintenance, the system assumes continued approval. Language shifts quietly. Optional becomes due soon. Due soon becomes something we recommend addressing today. Not because the car suddenly changed, but because the process expects forward motion. Owners rarely notice when the shift happens. They just notice that service visits feel longer, estimates feel heavier, and the car itself feels exactly the same as it did before. That confusion is intentional. One of the most common ways this escalation happens is through fluid services. After brake fluid, coolant, or power steering is approved once, the car is now labeled as well-maintained. That label sounds positive, but it also opens the door to repeat servicing on systems that are still operating perfectly fine. This is where inspection-based selling takes over. During routine visits, technicians perform visual checks. Again, inspections themselves are not the problem. The issue is how the results are described. Normal discoloration becomes starting to degrade. Minor wear becomes showing age. Components that are functioning correctly are described as not ideal anymore. None of those phrases mean failure is coming. Toyota parts are engineered with wide safety margins. Fluids are designed to operate effectively long after they change color. Rubber seals are built to tolerate heat cycles and time without being replaced early. A component does not need to look new to be healthy. But service center language often ignores that reality. When an owner hears starting to, they mentally hear about to fail. That gap between what is said and what is understood is where unnecessary spending lives. And because nothing feels urgent, owners rarely ask for clarification. Another escalation point appears when advisors use comparison language. Statements like "most owners at your mileage do this," or "we see these fail if people wait" are incredibly effective, even though they are rarely specific to your vehicle. They're generalized statements, but they feel personal. Toyota owners tend to be conscientious. They don't want to be the exception who ignored something important. They approve services not because the car is asking for them, but because they don't want to feel irresponsible. From a mechanical perspective, that logic is backward. Toyota reliability is built on consistency, not anticipation. Systems that are operating normally do not benefit from being replaced early. They benefit from being observed until a real change occurs. Noise, leaks, vibration, warning lights, or behavior changes are the signals Toyota engineers design around. Service menus reverse that logic. They ask owners to act before any of those signals exist. What makes this especially expensive is overlap. The inspection leads to a recommendation. The recommendation leads to a replacement that wasn't actually needed yet. Each step sounds reasonable on its own. Together, they quietly inflate ownership costs. This is how owners spend thousands over time without ever experiencing a breakdown. The car never fails, it simply becomes more expensive than it needed to be. And because nothing goes wrong immediately, owners assume this is just the cost of proper ownership. It isn't. It's the cost of unchecked momentum. Another factor that rarely gets discussed is mental fatigue. Service visits are demanding. You're processing explanations, numbers, screens, and decisions while trying to trust that you're doing the right thing. Fatigue makes everything sound acceptable. After enough recommendations, most owners stop evaluating and start agreeing. That's human, and the system is built around it. Toyota service centers don't need to rush you, they only need to keep things moving. Owners who avoid this trap do something very simple. They slow the conversation without apologizing. They ask one question that immediately changes the tone of the visit. What happens if I don't do this today? That question forces clarity instead of reassurance. In many cases, the honest answer is probably nothing. When that answer appears, urgency disappears, and the recommendation quietly loses its power. Toyota engineers design vehicles assuming owners will wait for symptoms, not schedules. Changes in sound, feel, temperature, performance, or warning indicators are what justify action. Until then, stability is the goal. That's why Toyotas that are driven gently and serviced conservatively often age better than those that receive constant attention. Frequent intervention does not equal protection. It equals disruption. This is especially true for owners who drive fewer miles per year. Short trips, light use, and steady habits place far less stress on components than aggressive driving. Yet service menus rarely adjust for how the vehicle is actually used. The same recommendations appear whether a car is driven 12,000 miles a year or 4,000. Once owners recognize this pattern, service visits become easier to manage. Recommendations are treated as information, not instructions. Decisions are made calmly instead of reactively. The vehicle benefits because it is left alone unless something actually changes. And something else happens too. Conversations become shorter. Pressure fades. Escalation slows. The system responds differently when momentum is interrupted. Quick pause here. If you've ever approved a service simply because you were tired of deciding, tap the like button. Subscribe if you want Toyota ownership to feel simpler over time, not heavier. And if a service visit ever left you feeling drained instead of confident, share that experience below. I see every comment, and those patterns matter. Once owners understand how routine services quietly escalate, they stop fearing maintenance and start managing it. And that shift alone is often what separates Toyotas that quietly last for decades from those that become expensive long before they should. By the time Toyota owners realize they've been approving services that weren't actually needed, the money is already gone. Not all at once, not in a way that feels dramatic, but slowly, visit by visit, until ownership feels heavier than it should. That's the part that frustrates people the most. Nothing ever broke, the car never failed, the engine never gave a warning, and yet costs kept rising. This is where the final truth about routine services becomes clear. Most unnecessary Toyota services don't hurt the car, they hurt the ownership experience. They turn a vehicle designed for calm, predictable longevity into something that feels demanding and expensive. Toyota did not build its reputation on constant intervention. It built it on conservative engineering and systems designed to be left alone until they show a real reason not to be. When service centers push frequent routine services, they aren't responding to the car. They're responding to a schedule designed for averages, not for careful owners who drive lightly, maintain consistently, and expect their vehicles to age gradually. That difference matters more as Toyotas get older. A Toyota with 80,000 miles that runs smoothly, shifts cleanly, brakes evenly, and shows no warning lights is not asking for aggressive maintenance. It's asking to be observed, to be listened to be driven. The owners who keep their Toyotas the longest almost always share one habit. They wait for changes before acting. They don't approve services because a menu says, "It's time." They approve them because the vehicle actually tells them something has changed. Color changes, mileage thresholds, and generic due labels are not. Once owners adopt that mindset, service visits stop feeling stressful. Recommendations are evaluated calmly. Decisions are made with context instead of fear, and costs stabilize naturally over time. This is especially important for owners who plan to keep their Toyota long-term. The goal is not to eliminate all risk. The goal is to avoid unnecessary disruption. That doesn't mean ignoring maintenance. It means understanding the difference between maintenance and interference. Maintenance supports stability. Interference resets systems that were already working. Service centers rarely explain that distinction because it doesn't fit neatly into a checklist, but Toyota engineers design around it every day. Another truth that doesn't get said enough is this. The most expensive Toyota owners over time are not the ones who skip service. They're the ones who approve everything without a reason. They do it out of responsibility, out of care, out of trust. And that's why this topic matters so much. Once owners learn to slow the process and ask what a service actually solves, the dynamic changes completely. Recommendations become conversations. Pressure fades, and the car benefits because it is allowed to age the way it was designed to. Toyota engines that reach extreme mileage almost always have something in common. Their service history looks boring, long intervals, few add-ons, minimal interference, nothing flashy, nothing aggressive. That boredom is what creates longevity. If a Toyota service recommendation does not address a current problem or a measurable change, it deserves time, not approval. Waiting is not neglect. Waiting is strategy. And when owners stop treating routine services as obligations and start treating them as options, ownership becomes calm again. The car feels the same. The driving experience stays familiar. Costs stop creeping upward, and confidence returns. Quick note before we wrap this up. If you believe Toyota ownership should get easier the longer you own one, tap subscribe. This channel exists for owners who want clarity, not pressure. And if you've ever looked back at a service invoice and wondered what actually changed afterward, leave a comment. I see every comment, and those shared experiences help other owners break the same cycle. Toyota didn't become legendary because people did everything early. It became legendary because people did the right things at the right time. When you bring that same mindset into the service bay, your Toyota stops feeling like a project and starts feeling like what it was always meant to be. A dependable machine that asks for very little and gives you a very long life in return.